Okay, so we should see people joining us now. Brilliant. Welcome everyone who's joining us, all of the attendees. We'll just wait for a little bit longer whilst some more people join us before we get started. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so whilst a few more people are joining us, I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm Catherine. I'm on the core team of the anthology this year, and I just thought I would start with a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on YouTube as of tomorrow. Secondly, a thank you to the independent publisher Parthian Books for helping us on the tech side of hosting this event tonight. If you want to comment or ask any questions or give praise or virtual claps, then please do so in the chat on the side. It's really nice for the readers to get feedback, especially when they can't sort of hear your actual claps and see the audience in real life. Okay, I think we've got quite a lot of people joining us already, so I'm going to hand it over to Joss, who is this year's editor and our host for the evening. Joss, you're muted.
Already a tech issue, so please forgive any of those that should happen this evening. I was going to say hello and welcome to the release of the 2020 Manchester Anthology. We're really excited to have you here. Thank you to all of the agents who are taking their time with us tonight. Thank you to all of the friends and family who are joining us from near and very, very far. It's really interesting. This web way of sharing this event with you is in many ways representative of the positive and negative of this year. I was sitting in my flat last night and I was thinking about how this is actually the strongest feeling of closure that our class is going to get to experience for this year's MA. And I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't sad about it, not getting to be with everybody in person, but also it really pointed out to me what is amazing about this year, that this book that we have created together is not only a representation of our year in the Masters, but it's a representation of not just getting through 2020, but creating and collaborating. And to me, that is such an exciting thing to get to be a part of with all the people involved in this. And I'm really excited to share their work with you. So without further ado, we will start with our first reader. I'm very excited to introduce Georgia Hayes. Georgia came to the MA straight from her undergraduate studies in literature at Exeter. She writes across poetry, fiction, and nonfiction, and has been published online in the Manchester Review. She contributed greatly to this entire event as deputy editor for the anthology. And she'll be reading an excerpt from her short story, The Wrong Forecast, which is part of a collection that she is developing, exploring the connection between the female body and psyche.
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is just the opening of my short story, The Wrong Forecast. The weather forecast was wrong the day Dr. Harmon told me about you. Clear skies with a light southwesterly wind, only a 5% chance of rain. Normally, I would have stood in front of my kitchen window and watched the clouds. I would have checked for frost, for rain, for sun, my chamomile tea warming my hands, its steam unfurling towards the ceiling. But thanks to Luke switching off my alarm, apparently I needed the sleep, I've been running behind my planned schedule all day. I didn't have time to check the clouds that morning and blame the BBC for my decision to leave my umbrella in its ceramic stand by my front door. My favourite suede shoes, heavy with the rain that wasn't supposed to have fallen, squeaked on the floor as I walked to Dr. Harmon's room. When she first gave me a tissue from the box on her desk, it was to wipe away the water trickling from my hairline into my eyes. The second tissue caught the tears that fell when she said you were going inside me. You would have been so small that Wednesday afternoon, smaller than a fingernail, smaller than the freckle on my left nipple. And yet, when I knew you were there, it was like I could feel you. each cell forming, dividing, growing. At 41, thanks to regular Pilates classes, fruit instead of chocolate, and only the occasional glass of red, my stomach was, if not firm, then definitely flat. But with the tissues scrunched between my fingers and my palm on my stomach, it didn't feel so flat anymore. How could it? It was now housed to one tiny, rapidly developing occupant, you. Dr. Harmon gave me several leaflets, booked to my next appointment, asked if I had any questions. I had thousands, but with my toes curled against damp suede, my left hand on my stomach, and my right hand full of tissues and leaflets, my questions dissolved before they could be asked. As I walked through the too bright waiting room, the squeak of my shoes was obnoxiously loud. I gripped my leaflets tighter. The squeaking got faster. I didn't look up as I walked round to my car. I slammed the door in the rain and threw the tissues and leaflets on the passenger seat. I tried to breathe, felt my breath hiccup in my throat once, twice. By the sixth, I was fixing my mascara in the rearview mirror. I smiled at my reflection, told myself what Mum told me the day Dad left. We'll get through this, you'll see. By the time I pulled up to my drive, I'd ripped my thumbnail down to the bed. The singing helped me focus, or rather, it kept me distracted. I just had to make a plan. I sat at the kitchen table and smoothed flat the leaflets, got my good pen and my good paper, the raw kind, 120 GSM, only the best for you. I sucked at my thumb to stop the blood seeping onto my clothes. Bloodstains are such a nuisance. We could do this. I could do this. And that's all of that one for now. Thank you for listening, guys.
Thank you, Georgia. So our second reader is Probert Dean. Probert is from Liverpool, and his short fiction has appeared in Mechanics Institute Review, Stupefying Stories, and more. He just placed 6th in a Writer's Digest competition, and he is also part of the avant-garde punk band Unstoppable Swedish Show. He served as a fiction editor for our anthology. Rob will be reading from Her Ladyship, in which a cynical mermaid finds an opportunity to escape from her human captors.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to George for that wonderful reading. I'm just also going to read the start of my story. If it goes on too long, just butt in. Her Ladyship, 3 words. The human wife glares at me as they wheel me up to the drawbridge. Glares more as her people, black trousers mainly, part to let me through. The looming castle eclipses the heavens, an amorphous gargoyled shadow against the night. Finely ground gems are embedded in the stone, so the walls glisten like ersatz stars in the corner of my eye. In the distance, the men are dismantling siege weapons and singing, though their songs sound more like football chants. Her Ladyship hobbles towards me, poking her tongue into her cheek whenever she puts weight on the injured leg. I hope it's hurt badly. She sticks a jewel-speckled hand into my tank and pulls out mine, which she kisses so hungrily I half expect her to take me right there with the human wife still glaring. The human wife turns to glare at the nearest distraction instead, a portcullis. But I can glean her thoughts from the vein in her neck, throbbing its little Morse code, fuck you. She thinks I must feel very important being wheeled around like this. The opposite is true. This contraption, my little tank on wheels, may be gilded, but it is still a cage, a crystal fishbowl. I'd renounce all my servants, all my jewellery, even cigarettes, to soar once again through the pelagic depths. Here in the world of sky, you can't fly. Some swim along the ground, but I've never tried it. Apparently it isn't seemly for a refined mermaid, their term, to writhe around on the floor like a worm. What a glorious night for victory, says Her Ladyship, which is what we call her now her name has been erased from history. Look, the moon reddens to honour us. Yes, blushing maiden, we may have lost 200, but the fish lost thrice that. While the earth's shadow has indeed dimmed her the colour of sangria, the moon doesn't look like she gives any more of a shit than usual. I pull myself over the rim, splashing water over everyone's shoes, and pop a cigarette in my mouth. A soldier, wincing from wet feet, lights it for me. I blacken my little fish lungs while our glorious leader, my beloved wife, talks of flanks shattered and cuirasses pierced, of silver plundered and mare women taken. That's how they got me, of course, 5 long years ago. I wouldn't come up here voluntarily, even though the seas are full of plastic six-pack rings, abandoned shopping trolleys, and my favourite, sewage. A mouthful of sewage would be like sweet nectar compared to a kiss from Her Ladyship. She's all tongue and usually tastes like a venti cappuccino. Halfway through my cigarette, a man, Some haughty land mammal in uniform snatches it and stubs it out under his boot. Apparently, it's time to go inside. The indoor smoking ban is one of the few remaining relics of civilization, and they won't give it up easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That was brilliant. Okay, so next we have C.A. Hanan. Alex is a young writer with 2 short stories published by Ellipses. He was also the finance manager for this anthology. And this reading is an excerpt from the first chapter of Heart of My Enemy, which is his first science fiction novel. Alex.
Well done, Rob and George. I hope I can continue the high standard. All right then. Dad told me that if I ever saw a man in uniform, I should run back to our basement. The soldier was only 5 feet ahead of me, silhouetted under the light of a single street lamp, his smoking gun pointed at the stars. I turned, my foot caught the lip of the pavement, and I almost twisted my ankle, but I couldn't let him get me after curfew. I had to run. I bolted across the road. The smash of another gunshot knocked the wind out of my lungs. I stopped running. "Come here," he shouted, as loud as a horn. My feet wouldn't move. The loaf of bread in my hand seemed more trouble than it was worth. But Dad would still be hungry. I was still hungry. I unwrapped my scarf, bundled the loaf inside it, and shoved it under my coat. My neck and face were cold, but at least the soldier couldn't accuse me of theft. I turned, feeling the pain in my ankle. The soldier was 10 feet away from me. His massive outline was a black block underneath the yellow light. "Do not make me wait much longer," he said. I limped faster. 10 feet became 9, 9 feet became 8. My legs felt like lead weights. I wrapped my arms around myself to keep the loaf from falling out of the bottom of my coat. With my head down, I scanned around me from the corner of my eye. The alleys between the buildings were thin. The darkness meant that I could only see varying shades of black from where the tributary roads went deeper into Stonehaven. Alleyways, alcoves, smashed windows that I could have jumped through, all seemed miles away. "No escape," the soldier said, waving his gun at me. The smoke was still pouring out of the barrel. There was no cover on Longport Road. I was an obvious target. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CA. So our next reader is Catherine Tan. You've already heard a bit from tonight. Catherine is a young writer from South Wales. She has a handful of short fiction publications, including a Penpro Prize and Terry Hetherington Award anthologies. She is currently a freelance editor and a publicist at Welsh publisher Parthenon, and she produces the podcast for New Writing, which is a collaboration with the Center for New Writing. She was absolutely indispensable in her role as managing editor of this anthology. Catherine will be reading an extract from her novel In Progress Until We Arrive, which takes place across 5 journeys and 2 generations spanning the 20th century.
Thanks, Joss. Okay, let me get this up. Right, so this starts just after or during a storm on a ship. Nancy was wrenched out of sleep by an unfamiliar cry. She had never heard a man wail. There was something about it. There was, oh no, sorry everyone, I've lost my page. There we go, let's start again. Nancy was wrenched out of sleep by an unfamiliar cry. She had never heard a man wail. There was something about it which struck every nerve in her body and made them all strum danger at once. Mixed in with that jolt of panic was a feeling of despair. She must have finally fallen asleep after hours of lying sweaty and half undressed, trying to recall in her homesick mind the dopey sounds of wood pigeons. She had carefully cradled the lump in her throat, occasionally letting it rise, only to gag nothing into the pot beside her. She couldn't have been asleep long. The hair around her temples was still damp from the sliding tears. It was enough, however, for her eyes to lose accustomed to the dark. The room was blackness. "Herman," she said. Her voice seemed to be eclipsed by the audible thudding of her heart. "Herman, what was that?" It had been too loud and close to be a dream. It had been right there in the cabin. Through the walls, Nancy could hear a baby crying somewhere else. She doubted herself. But then a sob released into the room despite every effort to hold it back. It creaked out of her throat, aching to suppress the tide. Nancy lowered her feet to the carpet and widened her eyes, trying to make out Herman. Wider they opened, almost beyond her control, looking for familiar shapes in the gloom. Another sob escaped through clenched teeth, shaken out with, "Oh God!" "Herman, what was it?" Crouching forward, hands out first, Nancy managed to find the edge of his bed, and then a hand. She held it, and it held hers back. Her bewildered mind raced through murder, blood, injury, despite the sealed door of the cabin locked tight before the lights went out. Something had changed, however. There was a hopelessness in the room. "What is it?" she repeated. He's gone, Nance." The grip on her hand tightened, fingers pressing hard between the splay of her bones. "The idiots killed him and I was goddamn sleeping." Nancy took a deep breath. This wasn't real. It was a nightmare. It was her husband's nightmare. They were safe in the dark of the little cabin, still floating on the top of the empty sea. She eased her hand away from his. "Shh, shh, shh," she said. "It's all right." She began feeling her way down between the beds and around the edge of the wardrobe. She could hear the shaking breaths begin to control themselves, air hissing out between clenched teeth. Finally, she found the switch. She paused, for a moment wishing that they could keep the darkness after all. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Our next reader is Danielle Elliott. Danielle is particularly interested in working class voices and writing narratives with outward angled perspectives. She is currently redrafting her first novel, which is a piece of speculative fiction. Danielle worked as part of the anthology's marketing and publicity team. She'll be reading an excerpt from A Rose from Dust, which is an investigation of poverty in Georgian Manchester, expressed through the eyes of a vampire.
Thank you. Is that all? Yeah?
You're good.
Brilliant. Okay, Rose from Dust, this is an extract that's been, well, it's actually been condensed for the purposes of the reading, but it's a short story, so I'll start. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Forsooth, I am an abomination. I'll bet my husband would never believe. The wintry morn I first met Luke, I was expiring under the blaze of the rising sun. I was conveyed to his lodgings and nursed to health. I remained and married him, for Luke was a surgeon and his medical procurements were civilizing. But my salvation did not begin with him. Alas, 'twas Rose, my gentle Rose, an orphan gilded with sadness, but unhardened by misfortunes. Rose, with her eyes hollowed large, her chilblained hands and her two big boots dangling and curling at the toes. Without Rose, I would have remained a pulse of hunger and a creature emptied of meaning. In the dark hours, I was her shadow. One wintry morn, twain ragged girls accosted Rose in the street. I rushed in, boxed both girls' heads, bloodying one's nose and blackening t'other's eyes. Wounded they ran. Rose was trembling, but appreciative. Her stomach murmured. I purchased a buttered muffin and insisted she partook of the victual. As she ate, I followed her to the railway ducts. Unnerved by the attack and attempting to express gratitude, Rose offered to share her sleeping place. I accepted, unwrapped my shawl and tucked it around her. There were objections, but these embered to a murmur as exhaustion, warmth and a full belly slipped her eyes to sleep. Close up I felt Rose's frailty, staggered heartbeat, the oft-times rattled breath and the bones that protruded where through her skin. Rose was dying. No physician's diagnosis was needed. The crimson blood splatters of her cough told Rose she was ailing with the malady that had stricken her mother. There was no reprieve for Rose. The meagre time she had left would bring naught but suffering, desolation and loneliness. Careful not to waken her, I unfolded Rose in my arms, drew back the shawl, felt for the pulse of her jugular and pierced. Bitter with disease, her blood gushed into my mouth. But despite the fatality, Rose felt naught. My anaesthetic saliva numbed the pain. There was no suffering. I had acted as an angel of mercy, yet the world had been emptied of Rose. Close to dawn, I stumbled from the railway arches, distraught and blistering. Luke discovered me by happenstance. We were wed for 21 years, but never did I reveal the circumstances of our first meeting. He would not have understood, for it was Luke's flaw and his virtue that he knew nothing of the degradation life could bring. Nathless, for the likes of Rose, if I had allowed, life is not merely suffering, 'tis losing thyself and descending deeper into the abyss. In the wake of my husband's death, I query withholding these truths, ergo whereof sayest thou to thy confessional?
Thank you, Danielle. So next we have Joss Arate Calvin, who is our editor. Joss was born and raised in NYC and lived in LA before expatting to the UK. They come to the MA from a varied creative background that includes directing a feature film currently streaming on Amazon, releasing music and video art, devising and performing in immersive nightlife experiences, and producing the Transforming Hollywood conference. They ran the ship as editor of this anthology. Joss will be reading an excerpt from Keys, a postmodern surrealist fantasy novel. In this excerpt, we hear not from the lead character, the troubled Cassandra, but from found document perspectives on her. Joss.
Thank you, Catherine. Dr. Lois Linklater, MD, Silverland Hospital Psychiatric Ward, Rancho Mirage, California, May 31st, 2016. Basic case history. Patient Cassandra Hart was admitted 10 days ago in late hours of morning after being contained by police post-psychotic episode. Police discovered Hart on top level of ArcLight Hollywood parking lot, curled up in fetal position next to boyfriend Het Martin's body. Gun was in Martin's hand, but covered with Hart's fingerprints. Police retrieved letter sent by Martin a few days earlier. Letter implies dissociative identity disorder, schizophrenia, addiction. Patient will be kept in Silverland Hospital until trial. Het Martin's letter to Nick Davidson. Nick, everything is off. It's raining in LA today. Car crashes abound. The world feels like it's ending. I've sat myself at this typewriter and I'm not getting up again until I've told you everything. Yeah, I know it's the 21st century, but I can't stand the idea of you scrolling through this on your phone. Plus, what I'm living through would be easier if I could imagine it as a film, so it makes sense to write it where I write my screenplays. And this whole disaster would a good film make? I bequeath the idea to you if I don't end up getting to it myself. It's a nightmare I'm living now, but it started off like a dream. The Cassandra that existed before all this began was the most beautiful human I've ever had the privilege to know. I may be a video game loving, bone business card waving modern guy, but I am still a damn romantic. They can't beat it out of me. And I can't blame her even after everything because it can't be her. She's been possessed by some sort of demon that has us both in its clutches and won't let us go. Nick, she could keep up with me. The whiskey, the metafilm ideas, the taste for adventure. Cass made LA feel like Blade Runner written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, like Bret Easton Ellis doing Raymond Chandler, like my kind of place. And it wasn't because she was beautiful, though she was. She never believed it, which is insane. I remember on Valentine's Day, after we got back from the shooting range, we'd done a couple of lines maybe, and I stood her in front of a mirror and I forced her to stare at her own face. I told her, "You're more beautiful than Marilyn Monroe." Cass was a Monroe junkie, but who could blame her? When she showed me the Misfits and we watched Marilyn call after those running horses, I said to her, "You didn't tell me they made a movie about you. They're the same, a child in a woman's body." When I told her she was more beautiful than Monroe, she pushed it away. And when I wouldn't let her turn away from her reflection in the mirror, she cried. Cass is the sort of girl who cries when she's happy. What the fuck am I supposed to do with that, Nick? It kills me. She kills me, Nick. Being in love with Cass is like watching a car accident in slow motion. And I'm in the car and all the doors are locked. And God help me, I don't want to get out. I don't want to get out. It's the best fucking ride I've ever been on. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Joss. Next up, we have Elenia Graf, who is a Manchester-based poet whose work grapples with the resurfacing of the traumatized self, navigating lesbian identity and always wanting more, but never saying it. She was born and raised in southern Germany. Elenia was instrumental as both a poetry editor and a member of the marketing and publicity team for this anthology, and she recently released her first zine, Inside Me Sleeps Fury.
Hello. I'm reading 2 poems. This one's called Something Quiet. I swallow my SSRI breakfast, text you good morning, hesitate to open the blinds so as not to disturb the 2 mugs idling on my windowsill. Let the paint stain. Let spilled tea galaxies bruise the white wood. This porcelain memory must remain untouched. The platform is hazy with cold air leaving cold bodies. A bloodless thing journeying to somewhere warm and living comes back out a nebula. I take a mental note to buy more mugs. I unlock my phone and don't type anything. St. Peter's Square exhales. I hug my back to my chest, think about train tracks and how I don't want to die anymore. The man on the tram scratching at invisible spiders in his eyes drops the clear plastic baggie and I hear porcelain shatter. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's keeping something quiet. And the second poem is called Cut. The morning I was cut from my mother's belly, they unwrapped the news that fed me 3 times before I could scream. I think children hold fear in different parts of their body. My hand used to hold hers like any daughters ought to. And when I learned that I was bad, I held that too. When I grew taller than her, I began shrinking. After each day spent as her biggest regret, I was needed to massage her feet in front of the TV. I imagined a stranger's hands around her calluses, kneading the ball just under the big toe of her left foot, her right foot. I pushed my spine into the back of the sofa, and when the show was over, I washed my hands. I think children hold fear in the parts of their body that remain small. The finger bones stretch and the femurs thicken, but a young bundle of flesh is still pulsating inside of me. A tumor the size of a fist against the stucco of my childhood bedroom. Say, I won't cut the sick out of me. I'll coax it out delicately. Once, a doctor cradled an infant covered in blood while unbinding its rope of nurture. Let me repeat what took place that morning with my own 2 hands.
Thank you, Elenia, and thanks for being our first poet to brave these waters. Our next reader is Erin McNamara. Erin grew up in Derbyshire and studied history in London before coming to Manchester. She's interested in fairy tales and folklore and is currently working on a novel set in a dystopian future, exploring privacy, free will, and the ethics of revolutions, which seems eerily pertinent at the moment. Erin led the anthology's proofreading team. Her piece, What the Fire Gave Me, takes us inside the mind of a woman on trial for witchcraft.
Thank you, Joss. So I'm going to read an extract from a bit towards the end of my short story. Thank you. Father McCarthy is walking across the square, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea. He's wearing his best vestments, the ones with the gold edging, and it's catching in the sun. He starts chanting, holding the prayer book out before him like a barrier between us. Father McCarthy, who I've known my whole life, who baptized me and buried my parents. Father McCarthy, who would have wed me and Tommy. He comes to stand before my stake, alongside the magistrate. It looks like they're attending me, like I'm some lady they have to bow before. It almost makes me laugh. The magistrate begins to speak. Margaret Lorimer, you stand accused of the crime of heresy. On the 25th day of the 3rd month, in the year of our Lord 1524, you did use ungodly magic to curse the woman Waverley, killing her infant child. Your jealousy and your wantonness drove you into the path of Satan, and let your weakness be a lesson to all. Margaret Lorimer, you have been found guilty of this heresy and are sentenced to die by being burned at the stake. Do you have anything to say for yourself? I never did, I say. Please believe me, I swear to you I know no magic. I never hurt Mrs. Waverley, I'm not a witch, please. Believe me, why won't you believe me? I'm shouting by the end, but it makes no difference. The faces in the crowd are smiling tightly, jeering, convinced of their own rightness, convinced they're making the world that bit better. They don't believe me. They won't believe me. They've decided what I am and what I deserve. Fear rushes through me, shortening my breath. I try to think of all the things witches can't do. I dig my nails into my torn palms, feel the blood run over my fingers. I try to turn them outwards, struggling against my bonds, try to show my weakness. I have no power, you have to believe me, I'm not a witch. Please, please, I beg of you, let me go. My voice is growing hoarse. I struggle against the ropes, but they're tied too well. Pulling at them only seems to make them tighter. With every plea, my voice rasps harsh against my throat. At the back of the square, Taverner and Pollock are picking up torches. They light them and begin to walk. I summon a deep breath and make a last effort to prove myself. Pater noster quies in caelus. But the smoke from the torches is curling towards me now, and the prayer dies in my throat. They reach the platform. I struggle against the ropes again, even though I know it won't make any difference. I imagine my fury flowing through me and washing them away. It's rising in me like a flood, this anger consuming me, but I can't move, can't expel it anywhere. All I can do is throw my head back and scream. Taverner and Pollock hold their torches to the wood. The magistrate looks solemn, as if he is the one suffering from this ordeal. He closes his book. Margaret Lorimer, I sentence you to death. May God have mercy on your soul. Thank you for listening.
Amazing, thank you. Next up, we have Charlotte Wetton, who's based in West Yorkshire. Her first pamphlet, I Refuse to Turn into a Hat Stand, won the Michael Marks Award in 2017. She's been published in Poetry Wales, Staple, Stand, and the Frogmore Papers, and won a New Writing North Award in 2019. She has performed at Alberg Ledbury and the Stanza Slam, and has a spoken word album, Body Politic. Charlotte.
Thank you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. I'm going to read 2 poems tonight. The first one, the title is Project Management is a Mental Illness. A weird kind of syndrome that blacks out the present. The present is annoying. The future is the thing. We tend to speak in jargon and to type very fast. We swig from water bottles and we pop Pro Plus. We sit scrunched up at the ergonomic desks, don't take vacations because we just get behind. Living in the future keeps you earning more and more. We are the managers who think we've got it all. Time is too many too small boxes. Time is a terrorist who ambushes projects. Time is whitewater rapids that will not stop. We're living in the future and we can't come back. We estimate capacity, allocate resource. What the point of it is, we don't really ask. Our love is for spreadsheets and a smooth transition. We are the managers who get things done. We go fast and faster, but it's never fast enough. Quarterly reports make us feel bish-bosh. Nights we hit the gym, burn off excess stress, getting pretty lean with these projects fueling us. Time is a tapeworm knocking at the gut. Time is a cake cut in ever smaller bits. Time is a suitcase you can't quite shut. We're living in the future and we can't come back. Us managers are sick. Our eyes are dull and glazed. We don't hear birdsong, we don't feel the rain. We're sitting in meetings, but we're not really here. In March we live in May, and in May we live in June. But visit Q4 and you'll see that all is well, with our Gants realigned and the sponsors all informed. Temporal disorders are often diagnosed. Prescribing a pay cut doesn't go down well. Time is the enemy, time must be fought. Time is feral and bites you on the arse. Time is a horse that runs itself to death. Time is a bug I think I've caught. I'm living in the future and I can't come back. My next poem is called Song of the Bug. Segmented tankman with glass noodle legs, we never stop questioning. Oh, monks, louse, monkey, peas, peasy, bug, doodle bug. Medieval perambulator, buffed to a dull sheen, both horse and knight. Oh, butchy boy, boat builder, monks, louse, monkey, peas. Tiny footed scuttle to the dark mulch underbelly of anything We're Grammar Sow, Granny Grey, Peasy Bug, Doodle Bug. When will we stop asking questions with our twin antennae half folded like a music stand? Sing Peasy Bug, Doodle Bug, Cheesy Bob, Chicky Pig. Corner like a bendy bus, articulated wagonette, the size of a vitamin. Grammar Sow, Granny Grey, Cheesy Bob, Chiggy Pig. Busy in the garden every weekend in our autumn garbadine, on our Scottish reel legs. Sing Monks, Louse, Monkey Peas, Cheesy Bob, Chiggy Pig, Peasy Bug, Doodle Bug, Pill, Millipedes, Armadillo, Diadee. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Okay, so next we have Shannon Benson. Shannon was born in rural Northern Ireland. In 2018, she completed her degree in English literature at Queen Mary University of London. Her short stories often experiment with horror and the surreal, and she aims to unsettle her readers. Shannon was our primary copywriter on the marketing and publicity team, and will be reading from her short story, What Stays Under.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, everyone. I'll just read from the start. There is a feeling of weightlessness in lying here, of floating in the ether. I often only feel the texture of the wood when I first lie down. After the lid is shut and locked and I'm pushed back under, I lose all feeling in my skin, as if the darkness has dissolved it away. I seep into that darkness, mingle with it and spread into the space. I ooze into the grain of the wood, the impenetrably shadowed corners, around the curled head of the nails, tightening them, keeping it all together. There is no space to lie on my side, to curl up or stretch out. There is no blanket or pillow, no softness or attempt at comfort. All that exists is this rectangle of darkness in me. I had been living here for about a year when things started to change. It happened in the evening, or what he told me was the evening. I can never tell because the windows are always covered in sheets of mold speckled cardboard. I had been dozing, eyelashes raking through the darkness when sudden movement jostled my stomach loose. It was a familiar sensation, the feeling of being pulled out like a drawer. Then came the scratching sound of the key in the lock, and then light. Always artificial, the dusty gold illumination from the bare light bulb hanging overhead. The light gives me my body back after all those hours of darkness. It reminds me that I have arms and legs, a torso buckled with ribs, hands paler than anything I've ever seen. His face is always the first thing visible. I am to remain lying down until he gives the order. As soon as he utters up, the word resolute and tinged with a deep red, I stand. Other times I lie in wait for the word, but it never comes. Instead, he grabs my arm and drags me up himself. These times are the worst. I got the order that day and stood, shaky, unforgotten legs. In stepping out of my box, I faltered, keeling forward like I was falling off a pitching boat. But he caught me, warm hands holding my arms with no intention to hurt. He righted me in a business-like fashion, staring down at his feet afterwards as if he were shy. The rest of it went as it always did. He had everything ready as usual. She sat and stared from the corner as usual, and I obeyed as usual. But something had changed between the two of us. A softness had intruded like a bruise on an apple. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Our last, but certainly not least reader tonight is Rose Amelia Kelly. Rose is originally from Leamington Spa, and she now lives in Glossop, Derbyshire. She studied English literature and creative writing at Warwick University before the MA. She writes modern realist fiction and creative nonfiction. The excerpt she'll be reading from tonight, titled Attendance Allowance, is from Rose's upcoming nonfiction book, White Rabbits, A Story About Luck, which retraces the author's late father's varied and complex life, following in his footsteps around the globe and closer to home.
Thank you, Joss. So yeah, no pressure after everybody else. I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning. My father's rented bungalow squats quietly on a row of identical buildings. The bushes are taller than the window and the grass is overgrown. Parked outside is his surprisingly clean Renault. The front left tyre is completely flat. I gather my disjointed thoughts, my paperwork and my nerves and ring the doorbell.
While I wait, I notice the recycling box is overflowing and make a mental note to check the bin days. I'm waiting a long time. When he opens the door, I see he has made an effort. He wears his smartest jumper, cable knit, and some oak-coloured slacks. His moustache has been trimmed, but his chin is peppered with 3 days of white bristle. I know it's 3 days because I arranged and paid for the mobile hairdresser. One of the many small details about his life that I'm unaccustomed to knowing. He is uncomfortably happy to see me, pulling me in for a hug and kissing me sloppily on the lips in a manner that's made me feel awkward since I was a small child. What began as a hug becomes a necessary lean as he loses his breath and wobbles. He asks me to fetch his stick. He thinks it might be in the front of the car. I settle him in his chair before taking the keys. There is a golf club resting against the wall in the hallway, a putter. I wonder what made him choose that club. It seems to me that a driver would be more appropriate for self-defense, but perhaps a putter is the suitable metaphor for his life. No longer does he have the power needed for the long shots. He is reduced to small, slow movements. I go and fetch his stick and I'm surprised to discover it's covered with pictures of white tigers and has a shining silver handle. Not exactly his style. Oh, that thing, he rolls his eyes, that's Pat's. Pat is my aunt, Dad's older sister, a voluptuously outlandish woman to whom the pattern is certainly suited. Pat feeds the pigeons in her garden and pushes her dog around in a pink pram. It seems all the necessaries of Dad's life are an embarrassment these days. My visits to the bungalow are rare. For most of the decade that he's lived here, he didn't allow me to enter, instead driving to meet me at a nearby cafe. These days, he has little choice but to let me in. The first thing I notice, that I cannot help but notice about the place, is the smoke, or rather the trail in its wake. Every surface is coated in that deep, tarry yellow, remembered from old pubs, pre-ban. The net curtains hang in the window like tripe, thick and sticky. His ashtray takes pride of place on the dining table next to his knackered old laptop, plastic and whirring. The walls are such a remarkable shade of yellow, you would think it was paint. Haven't they done a fabulous job, my father declares, waving indiscriminately. I look around dutifully. I'm less than impressed. He's referring to the professional cleaners I arranged to come and deep clean the bungalow, a deep clean that was completed 2 days before my visit. If this is the place post-clean, then I dread to think what it was like before. I mumble something non-committal, aware he is expressing gratitude, and offer to put the kettle on. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, in this moment, I would like to invite all of our panelists to unmute and share a moment of applause, since we can't quite have that with our audience, at least to join together for each other. So come join us and let's bring it together for everyone.
Hey.
This evening, two professors of ours, the first of whom wrote us an absolutely wonderful foreword. Couldn't have imagined better. So I would like to introduce to you the inimitable, absolutely ace Horatio Clare.
Thank you very much, Joss. Thank you, everyone. What a wonderful evening of readings. This is much worse than it should have been, because obviously I was hoping to go first, and so it wouldn't have sounded quite as crass as it will. But I was delighted to be asked to write the introduction to this very special anthology. And having taught about half the contributors, I knew it would contain excellent writing. But reading the whole thing, I was knocked out, and as a working writer, intimidated by the tremendous quality of the work in many. It's a bit like that moment when you go on an Arvon course and you think, well, I might be a floppy middle-class white male git, but I'm probably the best writer here. And then by the end of the week, when they read their stuff, you think, well, I'm still a floppy male middle-class git, and I'm not even in the top half of the best writers here. So thank you for the chance to contribute the one assured piece of mediocrity in the anthology. Every publication needs one. And it's been such an extraordinary and awful year, and particularly savage time for the arts, but two great things have come out of it. I mean, as the arts have been attacked by the pandemic and the government, the peoples of this country and the world have turned to writing and all the things that come from writing, from poems to box sets, as never before. We are needed. You especially are needed. And the second thing is that writers like those who we can see being born professionally in this anthology have risen mightily to the challenge to meet the challenge of telling new stories, of conceptualizing and describing the world in new ways, as you have here. I think it was Germaine Greer who said that prison is good for writers. They write. And in the prisons of your own homes, many of you this evening, staff, students, and guests, have set about making the writing that will help make the new world. So out of the furnace of anxiety and uncertainty comes this anthology, the hot and glittering from the flames, and our wise and canny friends and partners at Peters, Fraser and Dunlop are the only first agents among the many agents, publishers and readers who are going to be thrilled and engrossed by the writers and the writing it contains. I'm entirely certain that many of you have extremely exciting professional careers coming over the horizon very quickly. And I thought, could I offer any kind of advice? I think the first thing is you're never alone. Although God knows it can feel lonely, the more you do it, the longer you do it, and the better you do it, the more richly and closely connected you become to like minds and like hearts in the industry, which includes readers, of course. And in contradiction to our reputation for competition, backbiting, jealousy, and feuding, I found it to be a delightful and kind and supportive world, stocked with people who never lose sight of the fundamental point, which is that the work that is not fun is drudgery, and the point of everything in the end is something like joy. You can tell I'm not in the poetry business. And the next thing is be tough, be a fighter. If you are tough and a fighter, you can end up with a stunning title for your first collection, like The Witchfinder's Sister, or Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. If you act like a floppy, people-pleasing git, you will end up not with yours, but with the industry's choice of title. So In a Gap of Cloud, thank you very much, R.S. Thomas, gets turned into Running for the Hills, which everyone then gets wrong and assumes you stole from Kate Bush, which will then cause you to hold a bitter and irrational grudge against Kate Bush. And finally, enjoy this halcyon period as you write your first books. You'll never be more free than you are now, in this time when you don't know the audience and the critics who are waiting for you. Like all writers, I turn to the back of many. That's how we read them, like Sun readers looking for the football. And I noticed there are 30 names there, right from the writers and the editors, all the way down to the typesetters and the students who help put it together. And it's a reminder that the writer is only the lead singer, and behind them stands this whole wonderful, glittering industry of people who take tremendous pains and care to make the work shine and get it out in the world. And it's all waiting for you, including, I promise, certain readers. My favorite review on Amazon for my most recent book reads, I was hoping for some insightful ways to get through winter, but found myself depressingly dragged down into everyone's worst view of what winter is. I ended up skipping more pages than I read in the hope of finding something positive. There wasn't. So it's all there, and my advice would be to enjoy every minute of it. Good luck, Godspeed, fight hard, give us joy, and never let the bastards get you down, particularly not the bastards who read less than half your book. All power to your pens, and may your MacBooks never crash. Thank you.
Thank you, Horatio, as always, for your inspiring and humorous words. Before I hand this over to our last speaker, I just want to say some real thank yous to the team that helped put this book together. So this book is not just about the writers inside of it, but it's about everybody who contributed their time. So actually the first people I want to thank are the people who don't have writing in this book. Gray Marlowe single-handedly made our website and ran our marketing and PR team. Debbie Enever worked as one of our fiction editors, and Eleanor Bombard, as the editorial assistant, jumped in at every chance she could to make sure that everyone was supported in this process. So real huge thanks to them, and the next year you are lucky to have them. I also want to thank the rest of my core team, the uplifting and fabulous Georgia Hayes, and the literally couldn't have done it without you, Catherine Tan. Without Catherine, we wouldn't have had our typesetter, our printer, or the account that we're running this on. Just thank you for everything that you've done. And to all of our editors, our fiction editors, our poetry editors, our proofers, everyone worked tirelessly, and in this crazy, crazy year, did everything on time and with a good attitude. And it was just such a wonderful experience to get to work with everybody on this. C.A. Hannon made us lovely pie charts for our capitalist corner. And our marketing and publicity team stepped up to bat, running everything from social media to all of our copywriting to this event itself. So it's a really interesting thing. When I took the role of editor, I was warned that I might end up doing most of the work myself. And that was decidedly not the case this year. And in a year with so much to come up against, I think it's a real credit to the skill and the passion of everyone involved that we could come together so much to make this beautiful book that we're all in, which is very exciting. I also just want to take a moment to thank our visual artists, Jeremy Simon, who made the wonderful cover of this book, and Eli Moore. I want to get your last name right, so I wrote it down. It is Eli Moore. He made illustrations for every writer in the book. And it really has just brought this book to life at a level that we couldn't have imagined. So thank you to everybody. And thank you to our wonderful professors, to our university liaisons on this anthology in particular, which is Ian, John, who will be speaking in momentarily, and Shakina, who volleyed questions back and forth with us pretty much constantly through the process. We could not have done this without you. And thanks again to everyone in the audience for joining us and sharing this with us. I'm going to let John McAuliffe, the head of the Center for New Writing, close us out. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Joss. And hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. Every year, we're delighted to see 12 months of hard work come together from students who are so brilliantly diverse and talented as writers, short story writers, novelists, and poets, nonfiction writers too. And it all comes together into what looks like this perfect, neat anthology, this beautiful book which a team have put together this year. From our first meeting with you, all of you readers tonight and all of your fellow contributors in September, we've seen you as students picking your way initially through course options, deciding which projects you're going to be focusing on in semester one, on which poems, whether it's going to be stories, whether it is going to be the novel you're going to draft. We've seen you through the hard slog of semester two and the looming dissertation which hangs over the end of that semester, in which you show yourselves as writers in a single project. But this is a year, as Horatio has already said, when you've had to cope with all that, but also this absolute madness that has descended upon us in 2020. Tonight, taking notes as I watched and listened to you, I have loved hearing from and about all the variety of the world which you've brought onto the page, a being smaller than a fingernail, futures in which what survives of us in Probert's story is an indoor smoking ban, or smashed windows and a smoking barrel in CA's story. Catherine, I loved it when you lost your page, that one where the man's wailing can't quite drown out the memory of wood pigeons. The pierced jugular bitter with disease. Thanks, Danielle, for that as I ate my dinner. And who could resist Joss's I'm going to tell you everything, and the kind of girl who cries when she is happy. Elenia's fearless poems about fear. Erin's characters who think they can make the world better. Time as a bug we catch in Charlotte's poem. And then that amazingly abundantly various articulate wagonette. The threatening imperative up of Shannon's brilliant story. And Rosie explaining to us the difference between a putter and a driver. Joss has already thanked the many people who are involved in this anthology, but I think everybody will want to join me now in thanking Joss and thanking them for the amazing job they have done in leading the team that put the anthology together in unprecedented difficult circumstances. So for my fellow panelists, if you can unmute yourselves and give Joss a round of applause as well.
Thanks, and thanks to all of you.
finally, I would normally be trying to bring everybody across from the Burgess Centre to home for a drink at this point of the night and to celebrate your work this past year. Another time we're going to have to do that. Horatio has also brilliantly spoken about the future ahead of you in the industry. But I also want to remind you that this weird and terrible year has given you something else that writers need, which is a usable past. One when you have forged new relationships and networks with one another and with us, your teachers, which will stand to you, we hope, for years and years to come. I'd like to echo Horatio again by saying that you are not alone as a writer. You have resources now, not just the year of hard work, but the chorus of voices from your workshops and from your tutors, from Jeanette or Vona explaining exactly and clearly why you do not need those adjectives. Ian and Carmilla reframing your way of thinking plot-wise about your characters, or my injunctions to the poets I've taught and whose work I've enjoyed so much across the year about exactly how much you can do in the small space of the page of a poem. I have a final trio of editorial notes for you, which is to remember always as writers to put yourself in the way of the work, to look for it, and to stay true to the pleasure of reading, as well as to the pleasure, the inestimable pleasure of getting things down right as a writer. Onward with you all, and good luck to all of your work in future.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thanks everyone for being a part of this. It's been great to share it from close to home to 5,000 miles away. And yeah, we've really loved our experience here, and it's been a wonderful thing to get to come together and create this book. So thank you to everyone. I'm going to hand it off to Catherine for some final words.
Thanks, Joss. Well, we've already said thank you to Joss, but I did plan to do a thank you to Joss after their wonderful thank you to the rest of us. It's been a real team effort. Thank you everyone for coming. It's been really nice to be able to celebrate, even if we couldn't do it in person. It's so great to hear everyone's words spoken out loud. If you are interested in getting your hands on a copy of the book and haven't got one already, Blackwell's Manchester will be selling them, and fingers crossed we'll also be making them available online. And the proceeds are actually going to be donated to charity Centrepoint, based in Manchester, for homelessness. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone. I'm gonna pull the plug on this now and hopefully see you all in real life some point in the not too distant future. Bye everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye everyone.